Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay. Never comes again, another day like yesterday. Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm a little short on time, so we'll see how this goes. Maybe I'll get through it. Maybe I'll throw it out and come back on it another time. But something that I see happen when I'm talking to people, therapy has a lot of layers and there's a lot of different ways of talking about things, thinking about things, lots of different people, different personalities, different mental health challenges that present. But anybody who works with the human condition long enough realizes that there's certain basic truths and certain basic things that we all struggle with. And I'll hear myself say to clients every once in a while, I'll say, I love the conversations and the philosophical explorations and existential explorations and the science, etc. But in the end, everything kind of boils down to this one thing. And what's interesting is there are 3 or 4 one things. So maybe they're not really one thing, but there are some really, really simple things under the human condition that present in a complex number of ways because of personalities and socioeconomic status and culture, et cetera, but in the end, everybody's working with the same thing. One of my favorite ideas around that is not what I'm going to address today, but it's one that I say a lot, which is life is not about intelligence. It's, all of these things, perseverance, et cetera, that the truth is that success in life depends only on nervous system regulation. If you look around, you can see highly intelligent people with access to wealth and means and possibility who are doing really poorly and hating their lives and struggling because of nervous system dysregulation, severe chronic nervous system dysregulation. And you can see people come from really overwhelming environments with overwhelming circumstances, with odds stacked against them, who develop really successful lives and seem very happy and have great relationships. And it comes down to nervous system regulation. So one way of looking at life and therapy and doing with your life what you want to do is if you cannot fairly consistently regulate your nervous system, if you don't even know what it means to be in a regulated state, then that's one of those one things. And I came across a one thing the other day when I was talking to a client that I realized, and I'll try to tie it together at the end because all of the different one things really are just different facets of one thing. So there really is just one thing or results of a one thing. So it sounds like I'm sort of violating the language of calling it one thing, but it's a number of facets of one thing. But the other way of looking at the one thing that people come in with, I was talking to a client and I was like, you know what? Literally everybody in my own work, decades of my own work, and also in being a therapist for a decade, everybody who comes in the end, is working on and struggling with one thing, and that is judgment. Now, this sounds a bit cliche. Really, is that true? There's some very kind people that have difficult life circumstances, et cetera. And maybe I have a somewhat myopic view because I specialize in developmental trauma. And when people are abused as children, shame and identity issues are primary. They're absolutely core. They are the most difficult, the most challenging part of that work. If someone is badly traumatized, as an adult and they had an adaptive childhood, they can get over that pretty quickly. In fact, I've seen some really startlingly quick results from people who had good childhoods but had a really bad experience as an adult and developed acute PTSD. And in one case, it was literally 3 sessions. I did an intake, I did a full session of EMDR, and then reassessed. And on the reassessment, it was like, I keep poking this trigger and we're not getting anything back. You seem entirely reoriented, re-regulated. Looks good. Save your money. So, judgment. And there are ways to talk about judgment. You can talk about judgment as in judgment is a separation from the truth. And so this is where judgment connects to dysregulation, or maybe dysregulation is a first order symptom of judgment. Because if you really break judgment down, judgment is a separation from the truth. And the human nervous system and the brain does not do well with trying to maintain a constructed, illusory reality in the face of something that is actually true. We're not good at it. We have a hard time with it. It dysregulates our nervous system. So then you get dysregulation. But what do I mean by judgment? You have some people who walk around all day resentful and pissed off that other people are the way they are. And there are a lot of people who can give you a reason to feel that way. There are a lot of people who behave badly or are selfish or ignorant, and they're ignorant in a way that significantly costs other people in struggle and misery, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's judgment of others. But interestingly, and again, this may come more from working with complex trauma, judgment of others always has judgment of self written into it. And when you're in that state of judgment for others, it's going to piss you off, right? Therapists say things like, well, you know, if you're pointing your finger at them, it's probably reflecting something about you. Let's talk about you. And that really pisses you off. That pissed me off when I was a client, because I was like, you know what, sometimes it's not me being a bad person. Sometimes people are really shitty and they've done really shitty things to me. This is true. This is a fact. There are people who are victims of other people being really shitty. That's a fact. How is it that we can say that self-judgment is built in? Now, you want to be really careful with this, because it's going to sound like I'm blaming the victim, but I'm not. I'm just stating the fact of the thing. Let's say there's a rock that is the hardest rock that's woven in with some sort of metal that's impervious to everything. You could like leave it in the center of the sun, it's unchanged. You could crush it in a black hole, and this is the one thing that a black hole cannot conquer. And this rock has consciousness. If a flower gets in a fight with that rock, the flower loses. If someone stubs their toe, if a bulldozer gets in a fight with that rock, the bulldozer loses. That rock would have no judgment of anything. It's fine. Put me in the center of the sun, that's cool. Run over me with a bulldozer, no big deal. It's fine. What are we saying here? What we're saying is, if you are an organism who exists in a state that cannot be harmed by the actions, behaviors, or existences of other objects, organisms, et cetera, you would never have any judgment of anyone or anything else. So when we judge other people, it is impossible to extricate that judgment from a commentary on self. Now you have to be super, super careful about this, right? Because again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be human and have limitations and that your that you should now judge yourself for having limitations. I have limitations. Everybody has limitations. We function as human animals. We have biology. I'm an introvert. Don't put me in a loud environment for a long period of time. Look, I can handle it. I've had a lifetime of practice of self-regulating and sort of like turning off the warning signals in my head that's saying like, get out of here, like I hate this, and even interacting, and it'll tire me out, and I can I've trained myself to handle it, but it's a limitation. Someone else might love to go to a rave and just wants to sit there for 4 hours with the bass just kicking them in the chest, with people screaming and laughing and yelling and bumping into each other and dancing. That sounds like hell to me, but for somebody that's heaven, right? And it's not helpful to judge ourselves. I don't judge myself. I like being an introvert and I like who I am, but it took me a long time to get there. So when I say people who sit in judgment of others, there's a built-in judgment. It doesn't mean that you're supposed to be able to handle anything, otherwise it's actually your weakness. What it means is if you feel truly entitled to your boundaries, if I feel truly entitled to go, no, I don't like raves. If I went to a rave, I might enjoy it for half an hour. It's just too loud from second one. It literally hurts my ears. It's painful. It causes pain. And it feels like someone's electrocuting my nervous system. There's and my body's tensing. It's like, that's not fun. Okay, if I do not judge myself, if I accept myself and love myself, I don't need to judge people who go to raves. I can just be like, oh, I'm entitled to accept and love myself the way I am, and to as much as possible fight and advocate for myself to have space in the world and to operate in the world the way I want to. And if someone even came to me is like, oh, what's your problem? Oh, so sensitive, you can't go to a rave. If I truly had boundaries and true and deep acceptance, I'd just be like, the person's a moron. Like, I don't give a crap what they say. Like, you go do you, I don't care. Have opinion, judge me if you want. That's your problem. If I truly had that boundary and I was not in judgment of myself, I wouldn't even need to judge the person who tries to judge me, because I would know that their act of judgment meant they had a poor boundary and they felt judged by me saying, this is not for me. Well, if you feel judged by me going, I choose not what you're doing because I'm a different kind of animal. If you feel judged by that, that's coming from inside you. That's not coming from me. I don't have an opinion. I love extroverts. I love people who love to go to raves. I just don't want to go with you. So you see how the act of being in judgment indicates a lack of boundaries and a lack of self-acceptance. Even if I accept my limitations and acknowledge the truth of my limitations as a human animal, I'm limited. I have things that I have sensitivities to and things that I don't. For example, I'm a therapist. You can sit here and talk to me year in and year out about really painful emotional experiences. I have endless, it's not even endurance for me. I enjoy it. It's not a problem for me. I enjoy it. It might be toxic for someone else. They might sit through 45 minutes and just literally feel like, how could anyone do this? I can't handle it. Cool, no problem. Different types of animals. So if you accept yourself, there's no judgment of self. But what's interesting, if you accept yourself and you build boundaries in because you deserve to be protected and you deserve to be advocated for, then you stop judging other people, right? So when we judge other people, it's an indication that I don't have a psychological and emotional boundary. And I'm actually simultaneously pissed at them for putting me in a position where I'm really uncomfortable, but there's no way to escape that when I say that, what I'm saying is I'm weak enough that I can't advocate for myself and that someone else has control over me. Now, again, you have to be super, super careful when I say this, because there are people in situations who get placed in really bad situations where they have absolutely no choice. I'm not trying to beat up on Afghanistan, but right, it's a good example. It's like if you're a woman under the Taliban and you need to go to the doctor or you need to whatever, and there isn't a man to escort you, and right, they're going to do bad things to you. And that's completely unfair, and it's not your choice and it's not your fault. Even in dire situations like that, if that woman feels really resentful and pissed, rather than feeling like a deep sense of advocacy for self and like, how can I work this out so that I have the absolute healthiest possible possibilities in this situation, if that woman consumes energy in feeling like a victim, she certainly has a right to feel that way, but it actually reduces her bandwidth to problem solve and advocate for herself. So here's the second part that's also uncomfortable, because we're like, well, it's natural to be pissed and angry and to feel victimized and feel scared. And yes, it is natural. It's also important to recognize that the energy that I expend, that I generate internally to feel those things, is energy that I rob from myself to build the best possible outcomes and the best possible response to that situation. And when I do that, I condemn myself to not just external victimhood, which is a real objective fact. You are objectively being victimized by that society. But I am now imposing an emotional state of victimhood, which consumes a lot of resources and does a lot of damage. So this is where this again connects back to nervous system regulation. Resentment and judgment and anger at the way things are, separating myself from what's true. It's true, it's a fact, it's an objective fact that that woman has extremely limited choices and her life is endangered by merely entitling herself to what is her right as a human being. That's a fact. That is an objective external fact. It's simultaneously true that if she lives in anger and resentment, she now consumes all of her resources, and those take a lot of resources, and she dysregulates her own nervous system. And she hands to those people who have an unjust opinion of women and their place in society, she hands them the outcome. She physiologically becomes weaker, psychologically, emotionally becomes weaker, more torn down, more worn down, until she'll feel more overwhelmed and less of her intelligence will be able to be applied. And what happens is that people become more like what their abusers say they were. So we then start to objectively act out what the abuser says we are. I have a deep personal relationship with this, right? I was raised by a mother who was emotionally extremely unstable when I was young. And by the time I was 4 years old, she was telling me that I was crazy and would sometimes tell me that I was going to grow up and kill somebody. And there was this constant refrain in my life about how overly sensitive I was and that I was crazy, and anything that I did, it was instantly predicted that that's not going to go right and you don't know what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. Or then the refrain came, even though I didn't drink or do drugs, because physically I can't handle a lot of chemicals, I experimented with pot like a few times in high school, but wasn't for me. In addition, there was this constant refrain of like drugs. Every time I struggle with something as well, he's on drugs. He's on drugs. You know, talk to my dad. You need to talk to him. Like he's probably doing drugs, right? So there was this constant environment and refrain from her for whatever her needs were, that I was crazy, I was mentally ill, I was sick, I was unpredictable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And once I really realized what had been done to me, that my life had been extremely controlled and limited by this perception, that the perception had been built into other people around me, especially my siblings, but worse, it had been built into me. I literally thought that I was crazy. There was real rage. It's like, well, I feel entitled to rage and anger. Like that's a horrible thing to do to a child from as early as I understood language. That message was being run at me relentlessly, constantly. The anger and the dysregulation and the struggle, I'm sure it was part of healing. Like I needed to know how devastating this behavior had been and what it had done to me and what it had cost me. But at the same time, the more I leaned into it and the angrier I got, and the more I demanded that she admit that what she had done and was still doing, and that I demanded that my siblings listen to me about what she had done and acknowledge that, you know, a lot of my erratic behaviors had been created by my mother relentlessly harassing and pursuing, among some other really devastating things that she had done. The more I dysregulated myself and consumed all of my mental energy into this thing, this dysregulation, and then it becomes objectively true, right? You dysregulate yourself and dysregulate yourself, and it's almost like you're going like, I'm going to demonstrate what you've done to me. But for someone like that, who feels too much shame to really admit what they did, and who's already gaslighting you, all you're going to do is become what they said you were. Right? I wasn't born that way. That's not who I was. That was never who I was, and it's not who I am now, et cetera, et cetera. But I was working pretty hard at becoming so severely dysregulated in response to what she had done that people around me, right, people who were not even there and didn't know, probably would have been like, well, maybe he did have a hard childhood, but he's like, I don't know what it was then, but he seems a little crazy now. And so when I'm saying this to you, I don't say it, I say it with, I hope, compassion for myself and for you, that I'm not saying this to blame the victim. What I'm saying is there's literally no other way out. If I judge my mother, I'm simultaneously saying it's impossible to heal from what she did and that she has control. Like if I'm angry daily about what she did and I allow it to configure my internal environment, and this is what it comes down to. The only thing you have control over is your internal environment, and you don't even have much control over that. You can only keep sending compassion and grace and love and to do things that help self-regulate because you value yourself. You value yourself in spite of what other people have done. And in that, you begin winning back this internal regulation, right? Judgment of others. My mother probably deserves to be judged. I don't know, I'm not God, whatever. And I deserve to be angry. But in the end, that configures my internal environment and consumed massive amounts of resources. And for me to have a full, rich life required that I began going, I choose to configure my internal environment no matter what people do, no matter what people say about me. It's unjust. Yes, it's unjust. Okay, it's unjust. It is unjust. But it's also the only way. So if I were to sit in judgment on her, it simultaneously is a judgment of myself that I cannot make a choice to configure my internal environment. And let's come back to what underlies judgment and dysregulation, because judgment is a internally dysregulated state. I can recognize that what someone does is really unjust and cruel and not judge it, merely go, it's true. This is a fact. It's a fact. What happened was a fact, and it's a fact that on a child that's going to have the outcomes that it has. That's a fact. And I can hold someone responsible for that and go, oh, I choose not to have a relationship with you. If you behave that way in front of me, I choose to actually firmly say, this is what you're doing, and I do not allow that in my presence. You don't get to do that with me. You don't get to do that with my kids, whatever. You get to set boundaries, right? You get to have boundaries. But just allowing it to be true, accepting that I don't have control over what's true. The world is incredibly unjust and often very cruel. I don't have control over what's true. And if I begin to judge it, I dysregulate myself because I'm simultaneously pouring my energy into creating rage and dysregulation and frustration and a feeling of being a victim inside, the only thing that I have any hope of controlling. And those resources I need to set boundaries and advocate and fight for myself in this space so that I can have every chance to internally regulate, which allows me to build a life that's rewarding and rich and gives me some fairness and equality, et cetera. And then I can hope to offer that to other people and to participate in other people gaining. If I dysregulate myself and sit in judgment on someone else, which then creates judgment in me and fails to set boundaries, et cetera, I can't help anybody else either. I can't contribute either. So here's the parts that come together. Sitting in judgment and resentment is dysregulation, is internal dysregulation. I can have an angry response if something is in the moment and go, this does not happen. If someone is cruel to one of my children, I'll be angry and respond in the moment, this does not happen. But wasting time going like, what kind of person would do that? Like, I can't believe it. Like, all of that language that's all over social media is so without any worth in moving things forward. I can't believe it. What do you mean you can't believe it? Human beings have been shitty since the beginning of time. Like, when did we decide this was no longer true? When did we get confused that the world is full of war and starvation and rape and cruelty? Are we naive children? Like, no, it's just true, and it's always been true. So in that moment, if someone is cruel to one of my children on the playground or something, if I'm wasting time going like, I can't believe it, like, how could, like, what kind of parenting did they have? Well, this contributes what? I'm just burning through my brain power and my emotional power to create a judgment, to sit in judgment and doing nothing to protect my children. So you get to be angry, like this clean anger of like, whoa, I need to stop you right there. We might have differences in opinions about what happened or about how we interact with kids, but this is my child, and you don't treat my child this way. If we need to, we'll go to separate corners, but no one treats my child this way. And my child's going to see me say that, and they're going to learn to say that for themselves. The energy there is to set a healthy, respectful boundary, respectful for me, respectful for the other person, which strengthens me and regulates me and strengthens my child and regulates my child. There is no other way. There is no other way. Sitting in judgment burns through your resources that are needed to set boundaries and to respond to the situation It dysregulates you, and it simultaneously says, I am not capable of setting boundaries. Because when we sit in judgment, what are we actually doing? We're actually going, well, I hope someone sees my distress and sees that I'm saying, like, how could someone be this way? And they're like, yeah, you're right. How could someone be like, oh, what a crappy person? And then what we really hope is like 10 or 15 people say that, and then that person feels really bad, and they know that they're a horrible person, and they stop doing it. Does that work? No, it doesn't work. Being passive aggressive and judgmental doesn't work, because we've been watching this in the United States for the past 20 years. Because what does that person do then? Like, these weak, sensitive people, blah, blah, like, I'm just making up sides. But maybe there's somebody who's like, oh, these ultra liberals and they don't know how to discipline their kids and blah, like whatever it is. I don't care. What do? They go and they find people who agree with them, who will be like, oh, totally. Like, I can't believe those people. Their kids are going to grow up and be too soft, and they're going to be the end of the United States. And then they sit in judgment and they burn through all their emotional energy, and they can dysregulate themselves, and they dysregulate their interior environment and spend none of their time and energy actually setting a boundary. What could that person say? That person could say, hey, man, it's your child, but I saw your child doing something, interacting with my child in a way that I don't accept. And so this is what the behavior was. And either you can step in and do your gentle parenting, whatever it is you're doing, or I'm going to step in which case I don't need to be pissed. This person is acknowledging my boundary and saying, I also have a boundary. And it's not my right to say I agree or disagree with that person's boundary, because they don't agree or disagree. They don't agree with my boundary, right? We can't push society forward by deciding we all have to agree on what the boundary is. We only have to agree that we must respect people's boundaries when they respectfully and firmly state what it is. So the other person might say to me, hey, like, I didn't like what your son or daughter did, and I didn't see you having a response to it, so I stepped in. Okay, cool. We're talking. I disagree with you. I might even dislike you. You disagree with me. You might even dislike me, but we're modeling for our kids how to interact with people with whom we deeply disagree in a democracy, such that we don't end up killing each other or hating each other, or dysregulating ourselves, or lining up, being so weak that we're like, I'm going to line up 20 people who say that I'm right and convince you that you're a jerk. And then we're going to cancel you, and we're going to, like, whatever it is. It's all wasted effort. So that person comes back and says, I go, okay, I don't agree with you, but your kid is your kid and you have a right. What if we do this? I would like my child to see that whatever happened, that your child did not like what happened. And so I'm okay with my child saying, hey, I'm sorry, whatever happened. Are you okay with that? They're probably going to be like, yeah, sure. And I might say to my child, I don't know what happened, like, and I don't know if you, but when we make people uncomfortable, we apologize, not because we're saying we're wrong or right, like, I don't know, it's complicated, but just because it matters to us that our fellow American or that our fellow human being was uncomfortable in the situation. Would you be okay with that? No. Would you be okay with dad saying it? No. Okay, I apologize, dude. I'm not going to force her to. I don't know what happened, but maybe we just go to our separate corners and we'll just let it go. I feel like we fairly successfully navigated something in which we have deeply different opinions about how it works, but we seem to have been generally respectful of one another. And that's the kind of crap that keeps democracy going, that keeps the human race going without us murdering each other. The energy, right? If I dysregulate at any point in there and get really angry and start being passive aggressive, oh, you're one of those people? Oh my God, like, I can't believe, like, what's going to happen to your child? Like, what do you think is going to, oh man, like, it's infantile, the level of dialogue that we've sunk to, encouraged by social media. It's infantile. It's like little kids going, well, you're a total jerk. You're a poopy head. It contributes nothing. The dialogue that I modeled, lots of people are going to be like, that's not realistic. I can't, like, there isn't any other way. Literally is no other way. Any other way dysregulates you and makes you a victim, configures a victim state inside, and burns through your resources so that you can't apply it to learning to set boundaries, learning to be assertive, like whatever it is, and vice versa. What if that person behaves really badly? It's like, F you, you want to get knocked out? No, I don't. Carry on. I'm going to take my daughter and we're going to go over here and have a good life. Enjoy. No matter what happens, dysregulation burns through your resources and does not allow you to work for and imagine and creatively respond to get the absolute best for you and your family, you and your children, you and your friends, or just you. And judgment is an act of dysregulation. I started with saying dysregulation was the one thing, and there are 2 or 3 one things. But in the end, they're all the same one thing. They're facets of the one thing. Judgment is an act of self-dysregulation. Judgment is separation from what's true. What's true is I have a right to configure my life and live my life the way I live it, and to raise my kids and to teach them and socialize them the way I choose to, and that other person does too, unless they're hitting their child or molesting them, like really, really extreme examples where society steps in. We both have our right, and it is my job to validate that person's right, to respect that person's right, and to insist that other people respect my right. So accepting my actual role, my very, very limited role in society, I cannot impose my will on other people, but I can use all of my energy. Instead of dysregulating, I can, which is judgment. The first act is judgment, which is also self-judgment. I can use all of my internal energy to set boundaries, to configure my own interior environment such that I stay creative, flexible, assertive, calm, all of my resources ready to respond to whatever life happens to throw at me. That is an acceptance of the truth of what I am as a not very consequential one single organism on the face of this planet that's a blip in time. That should inspire me to fight even harder to advocate for myself. But the truth is that there isn't anything that says that life is supposed to be fair for me, or fair for anybody, or that it ever will be. But that I'm alive and I have a chance to, rather than to sit in judgment, which is also a self-judgment. So there's that piece, which is the interactive social piece. There's another piece, and I'm running out of time, so I'll have to sprint a little bit, where I talked about that the human brain and nervous system does not do well with constructing an illusion and trying to act as if that's true while something else is true. Where accepting the truth, even when it's unpleasant, is far more regulating and calming. And judgment is only an illusion. Only. There's no such thing as judging someone, being resentfully judgmental of self or others that is true. It's always an illusion. And again, I don't have time to talk through it all, but I'll take you through a logical test of this. When you're born, you pop out. There's no user's manual. Lots of people are going to tell you that there is, that there isn't. They're just a bunch of people navigating life and navigating the mystery, trying to figure it out. And they'll be like, well, so-and-so 1,000 years ago said X, Y, Z, and I think that that's very wise. Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Like cliches apply sometimes, and sometimes they're exactly the wrong thing. And everybody's always trying to create a policy and say, well, you know, this really is the best policy. Yeah, in some situations it's horrible. No matter what you think and do, you have to respond to what life hands you and try to moment respond to it in a way that's healthy for you and kind and healthy for other people. So there is no user manual, but you pop out and people start sending you the message that you're supposed to be this way and you're supposed to be that way and I'm supposed to be this way. And people generate shame based on the expectations that were given to them, and then they pass that shame on to the kids, blah, blah, blah. But this is all an illusion. When you pop out, you don't have any opinion about whether you should or should not be. When I popped out, I'm pretty sure I already had an introverted nervous system. I had no opinion of an introverted nervous system. I just wanted to navigate with my nervous system and be happy and enjoy myself. Judgment is always a refusal of accepting the truth that you are what you are, and there isn't any opinion to be had about it. You just are. People who impose judgments on you are people who are like, well, the kind of animal you are, I'm too weak to defend myself or to set boundaries. Therefore, I'm going to try to judge you, to control you and shut you down so that you no longer are a problem for me. So what they're really doing is saying, I judge myself too weak and too confused and too overwhelmed by illusory expectations to actually let you be who you are and to advocate and fight for who I am. And when who you are is a problem for me, I'm just going to go, whoop, there's the boundary. I respect you. You're that kind of animal, but don't bring that here. We're not doing that here. Not with me. This is not what's going on here. So judgment is always a separation from what's true. When people come to therapy, the only thing they're trying to solve is that they judge themselves. If they stopped having opinions and accepting expectations and blah, blah, and just went, I popped out and I seem to be like this, instantly shame goes away, guilt goes away, all of their resources come back, all those resources that they're funneling into judging themselves and being resentful towards other people because now that I've judged myself incapable of navigating, I want other people to configure the world in a way that I'm comfortable in, which is never going to happen. It's just a mess. It's never going to work. So instead of expending all that energy, just accepting I am what I am and I like it and I enjoy it and I'm going to navigate reality as such, then all their resources go into navigating reality in a way that's mostly joyful and pleasant for them. Challenging, exciting, whatever it is. So these things are all the same thing. Judgment is an act of imposing an illusion. When people come into therapy and I say the only thing anyone is ever working on is judgment of others, which is only actually judgment of self. If every single one of my clients completely let go of all judgments, I would have no practice, period, done. All their resources would go into inventing ways of being, establishing their boundaries, respecting their boundaries, finding people who mesh with them really well, avoiding people, and they would have a pretty good life. The act of judgment is the separation from what's true. And we begin having expectations and judging what's true and saying, well, it should be, or it shouldn't be, or it should be more of the book. It's all BS. It just, what's true is what's true. If you start from there and expend no energy in having an opinion about it, and you begin advocating for what it is, and when people come and tell you you shouldn't be that, blah, blah, go fuck yourself. That's their problem because they judge themselves, and you being that way, they don't know how to set a boundary or find their own situation. So they're like, well, I need you to not be that way so that I can be comfortable. No, that doesn't work. You can't configure the world for your comfort. You can only accept yourself and then take all of the energy that you free up. You have no idea how much energy we invest into self-judgment and judgment of others, which is a dysregulated state. How much energy it takes to keep ourselves dysregulated. Dysregulation is not something that does itself that you suffer from. It takes an enormous amount of energy for you to generate dysregulation. It's something that we actively do minute to minute by running these programs of judgment and separation from truth, refusal to accept truth. My spouse is like this: either I'm okay with it and I accept it, or I move on. No, I want to judge them and argue with them and have a miserable relationship and be pissed that they're like this. Like, no. They are that. Accept it and find happiness, or move on. Judgment is separation from truth, and it requires enormous amounts of energy to dysregulate ourselves to try to maintain an illusion that there are expectations to be met, that there are shoulds and should nots. All of these things are the same thing. Separating ourselves from the truth and trying to maintain an illusion is incredibly dysregulating, and it requires an enormous amount of energy to actively dysregulate ourselves to pretend that this illusion is true, that there are expectations to be met, that there is a rule for how you're supposed to do this. There isn't. So we waste all that energy doing that instead of accepting that I'm this fairly meaningless organism. I bring meaning to things. And if something is meaningless, or I don't like the, well, like, I need to channel all my resources into, rather than trying to make an illusion true, I should or should not, simply finding what works for me and then living a joyful life. And then it's so much fun once you find that to help other people, to contribute, so that you have a whole community based around joy and excitement and engagement in life. Right? And then that becomes a really amazing thing, a really beautiful thing. So in this way, when I say the only real problem in life is dysregulation that blocks success. Like, well, is that the one thing, John? Yes, because dysregulation, the primary cause of dysregulation is us attempting to maintain an illusion as truth. And our attempt to maintain an illusion as truth comes from judgment of self and others. It's all facets of the same thing. If you just accept what's true about and for you, you will discover that you're beautiful. You will not discover that you are worthy of judgment. If you accept that truth, you will experience a cessation of dysregulation, and you'll feel a font of energy and excitement and joy in life that will make you want to set boundaries and to navigate kindly, firmly, and respectfully with people with whom you don't mesh, so that you can find people with whom you do mesh, that you can be excited about life and you can enjoy and pursue life. Separation from truth is dysregulation. Separation from truth is an act of judgment. Someone told me it's supposed to be a certain way, therefore I'm going to pretend that it is, or I'm going to pretend it should be, or like whatever. It's just pretend. And we do not do well with pretend. We separate ourselves from truth. It requires an enormous amount of dysregulation to maintain that lie. And in that dysregulation, we weaken ourselves, and then we say, I'm weak because of who you are. And we judge that person, but what we're really saying is, I'm consuming all of my energy and resources attempting to maintain a lie about myself, that I'm not beautiful, that I'm not okay just here as I am, and that I should send all of my resources into configuring my life and my experience in a way that's joyful and exciting. In this way, separation from truth, dysregulation, and judgment are all the same thing. And everyone who comes into therapy is working on the same thing. They're trying to regulate themselves, but they can't do it as long as they hold on to an illusion about themselves and an illusion about other people, because it requires dysregulation, an enormous amount of desperate energy to maintain the illusion. The moment they let go of the illusion, suddenly they feel regulation. It happens simultaneously, which is why I say it's the same thing. The moment you let go of dysregulation, it's impossible to judge yourself. The moment you stop judging yourself, you will experience regulation. The moment you experience regulation, you will realize it's because you accepted what's true. Those are inextricable. They cannot be separated. And if every human being on the face of the planet succeeded at whatever it is that shifts all three of those things at once, I'd be out of a job. A lot of people would be out of a job. I wish for that. I hope for that. I wish. I'm working for that. All right, guys. I've got incoming. Love you guys. Hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.
Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.